are listening to Harp Talk. I'm your host, Patrice Fisher. Our guest today is Nicolas Carter, harpist, composer, and teacher. He has a foot in two worlds. His mother is Latina, and his father is American. Nicolas has lived in both South America and the U.S. He learned to play harp in Paraguay as a child, where he was influenced by the folk music of Latin America. He returned to the U.S. to attend university and discovered North American contemporary music. Mr. Carter is currently involved in presenting music and theater programs in New York schools. Many of his compositions were inspired by the time he spent in his native Minnesota, blending two cultures from the southern and the northern hemispheres. You are listening to Libre, performed and composed by Nicolas Carter.
I grew up in Paraguay, where I learned to play the Paraguayan harp as a child, and that's my main instrument that I learned, and the style of music that I sort of come from is Paraguayan folk music. And I just learned it as a child, took private lessons from a teacher called Isidro Caballero, father of one of the most renowned Paraguayan harpists, Nicolas Caballero. And then I ended up in Minnesota by the time I was 18 to go to the University of Minnesota. And then I started a different career, which is joining the Paraguayan harp with all these different Latin people that were living in Minnesota in those years.
You are listening to Crossing the Isthmus, performed and composed by Nicolas Carter.
My father is from Minnesota. My last name is Carter. And my mother is from Uruguay, South America. And she's from Swiss immigrants, first generation Swiss immigrants that arrived to South America in the 1920s. So they spoke French in their home, so they were very European, background. And I grew up in Paraguay, which is very different from Uruguay. And there they speak Guarani, and the culture is very different from Uruguay. So I think from a very young age I really had it clear that every time I had to switch from living in Paraguay coming to visit my grandparents in Minnesota, that I had to do this big adjustment. So we exercise what is called cultural flexibility, knowing how to be in one part of the world, knowing how to be in the other part of the world.
You are listening to Nicolas Carter performing Vírgenes del Sol by Jorge Bravo de Rueda.
And so I sort of started blending my tradition with the traditions of people from the Caribbean, a lot of people from Mexico predominantly, people from the Andes, people from Argentina, Brazil. And I think, that's been sort of the evolution of my music, and sort of also getting to the point where I started to define my own style of approaching the harp.
You are listening to Pájaro Campana by Felix Perez Cardosa of Paraguay.
It takes a while, and the harp is an instrument that, because of the fine movements that it requires, it takes a determination and patience, and really you have to love it. My dad and my mom never told me to practice the harp, never. And if I did or not, that was just up to me, and so it was my choice, my desire. But you have to love it. It has to be in you if you really want it to become alive.
You have been listening to Harp Talk, interview with Nicolas Carter. I am your host, Patrice Fisher. Our audio engineer is Carlos Valladares. This program is produced by the New Orleans and North Shore chapters of the American Harp Society. It is sponsored by a grant from the Louisiana Division of the Arts, Decentralized Arts Program, as administered by the Arts Council of New Orleans.